My name is Mike English. I use he, him pronouns, and I live in downtown Silver Spring in State District 20, and I'm a member of the JUFJ housing team. In this video, we'll discuss what's at stake in the race for governor and lieutenant governor. The main constitutional responsibility of the governor of Maryland is to implement state laws and oversee the operation of the state executive branch. The executive branch of Maryland government includes departments such as labor, housing, police, education, as well as independent agencies, commissions, task forces, and advisory boards. The governor makes executive and judicial appointments and is the head of the state's National Guard. The governor also advances and pursues new and revised policies and programs using a variety of tools, including oversight of departments and agencies, executive orders, executive budgets, legislative proposals, and vetoes. Because of the extent of these constitutional powers in Maryland, Because of the extent of these constitutional powers in Maryland specifically, our governor has been ranked as among the most powerful governors in the United States. While recent reforms have given the legislature more budgetary power, the Maryland governor's office remains extremely influential. I'll pass it over to Anita now to talk more about the governor and lieutenant governor's race.
My name is Anita Lampel. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Bethesda in District 16, and I'm co-chair of the JUFJ Montgomery County Leadership Council. So veto and budget powers give the governor a direct influence on policy in the state of Maryland. These powers assure that the legislature must work with the governor in crafting state law and in passing a balanced budget. As Mike said, the governor can propose legislation to be considered by the General Assembly. In addition, every bill passed by the General Assembly, except the annual budget bill, must be presented to the governor before it becomes law. There are 3 actions that a governor can take on a bill passed by the legislature: sign the bill into law, take no action and let the bill become law without a signature, or veto the bill. Any bill that the governor vetoes may be overridden by a 3/5 vote of the total number of members of each house of the General Assembly. Now, Governor Hogan, who is in his last term as governor, has vetoed dozens of bills since he was elected, which includes many of JUFJ's priorities. He vetoed earn sick and safe leave, $15 minimum wage, parole reform, building a women's pre-release facility, multiple police accountability bills, and multiple immigration rights bills. While vetoes can be overridden, it often adds another year to the legislative process because veto overrides usually don't happen until the following year's legislative session, which runs from January to April. The legislature's ability to override vetoes doesn't undo the harm that the governor can cause by vetoing bills, especially in cases like the Time to Care Act, where the substance of the bill is widely supported and desperately needed by a majority of Marylanders, and the governor appears to have vetoed the bill for political purposes. Relief for Marylanders on critical issues can be delayed by gubernatorial vetoes. The state operates on an annual budget cycle. The governor is constitutionally required to submit a balanced budget proposal, and the legislature is required to approve a balanced budget. Now, in 2020, Maryland voters passed a ballot initiative that will change our state budget process starting with this upcoming 2023 legislative session. As before, the governor will propose the budget. The General Assembly will now be authorized to increase, reduce, and/or add items to the budget. This is a significant change in the balance of power because for the first time, the General Assembly can add spending to the budget. Now, there are restrictions to the General Assembly's new powers. Legislators will not be able to increase the state's overall spending, and they will need to pass a balanced budget by the end of the legislative session. In addition, the governor retains a fair amount of power because they can line item veto any part of the budget. The General Assembly can override any line item vetoes with a 3/5 vote. The governor and lieutenant governor are elected as a ticket every 4 years in non-presidential election years. There is a 2-term limit, which means Governor Larry Hogan and Lieutenant Governor Boyd Rutherford cannot run again. The lieutenant governor is elected along with the governor, and the candidate for governor usually picks a running mate who will help balance the ticket along gender, racial, and geographical lines. Candidates from the Democratic, Republican, Libertarian, Green, and working class parties will be on the ballot. In the accompanying slides, the names of the candidates are linked to their campaign websites for you, so you can learn more about their backgrounds, their priorities, and their endorsements. JFJ has experience with 2 of the candidates from their time in the Maryland General Assembly. Aruna Miller, who is running for lieutenant governor on the Democratic ticket with Wes Moore, served as a delegate for 8 years representing District 15 in Montgomery County. During her time in the General Assembly, she was consistently supportive of progressive legislation, including earned sick and safe leave and $15 minimum wage. Dan Cox, who is running for governor on the Republican ticket, served as a delegate for 4 years representing District 4 in Frederick and Carroll counties. During a Judiciary Committee hearing in February of 2022, Dan Cox espoused the Great Replacement Theory, which imagines Jews are secretly funding a project to replace white Americans with immigrants of color. JUFJ sent a letter to Speaker Adrian Jones and members of the Maryland House Judiciary Committee to speak out about this usage of a racist and anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. You can find a link to that letter in the slides. This slide has pictures of other candidates in the governor's race whom I mentioned earlier. When we think about what's at stake in the governor's race, one key thing we think about is the future of the state budget and how we invest in our community's most vulnerable residents. Much of the funding for our counties comes from the state, including significant funding for infrastructure and schools. Right now, there are a number of unfunded mandates for important projects that have been passed by the legislature, but not included in Governor Hogan's budgets. One such unfunded mandate is the $3.5 million designated by the legislature to train nurse midwives, physician's assistants, and others to perform abortions in preparation for the likely influx of people seeking to get abortions in Maryland. The next governor will determine if the funding is released for that training. Another example is the Women's Pre-Release Center, which has been a priority issue for JUFJ and our partners at Out for Justice and the Maryland Justice Project. Pre-release centers help people nearing the end of their prison sentences secure employment, housing, education, family support, mental health, and other services. For more than a decade, there have been multiple such facilities for men in Maryland, but none for women. Legislation passed requiring a facility for women, but Governor Hogan did not fund it. After a 2-year struggle to secure funding, advocates successfully lobbied the legislature to include $2 million in the 2024 capital budget. Our next governor will have the power to veto legislation and delay funding, or to move quickly to support those who need it the most, like women moving from incarceration back into the community. And your vote will make a difference. In the next video, Lisa will talk about the Attorney General's race.